You're listening to Developmental, Property and the Mind podcast, where development industry insight meet mindset with Trafalgar CEO Joe Aboud. Join one of the property industry's most free thinkers as he explores the path to success and contentment.
Good morning, everyone, on this wonderful winter's morning. Welcome to today's episode of Developmental. Today, I have the pleasure of working with a really, really good friend of mine, amazing planner in the state of New South Wales, a good friend of mine, Adam Byrnes. Good morning, Adam.
Hey, Joe. How's things?
Excellent. Yourself?
Yeah, great.
Mate, today we're just going to have a bit of a chat about our life and the way we do things on a day-to-day basis. And, it's kind of like a day in the life of Joe and Adam in a way, right? Yeah? You good with that?
Yeah, it's slightly a bit scary, but let's see how we go.
So, mate, like after 25 years as a town planner, what does your day look like for you now?
Yeah, so I guess the great thing about my day, I love my days, I love my job, and that is, I actually can't answer that question kind of in a very linear or precise way because every day is so different.
But that's the fun, right?
It's awesome. I love it. And every day is different. I'm fortunate that I've reached a point in my career where there is not, I'm not desk bound, but of course I've still got a desk. I enjoy my relationships across a series of clients, across my relationships with government, and it's just a great fun day. So I didn't really give you an answer, but the answer is every day is different, and it's essentially typical of most, I guess, management in small business. A series of meetings, series of tasks, a series of management of people, and ultimately even trying to handle clients like yourself, Joe.
Yeah, I can probably be a bit of a handful at times. I will take this opportunity to apologise to you live.
Accepted.
Live on this podcast. I think that's the perfect answer. I think being able to stay agile and not be restricted or constricted in any strict schedule is I reckon key to our success. I think it'd get really mundane and boring if we just got stuck doing exactly the same thing, kind of being like I hope I don't offend anyone out there, but like being one of those planners at council where all they're doing is just churning and burning, applications and reviewing applications and stuff. And, what a boring world that would be for me, right? And you, I guess, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And I guess that's why you jumped. I mean, your past life was planning New South Wales. And so you've jumped ship there and come to our side of the fence. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. Okay. So I enjoyed my my early career. I think it's always good, particularly in the planning arena, that people do cut their teeth in government. And so I've had enjoyable experiences on the ground, so to speak, in local government. Brushed with the Department of Planning. I went and did a little bit of work for the Republic of Ireland in a planning realm, and all those things were great fun. They're fundamental, they're important, they're foundational for, I think, a town planner. And then at the end of the day, I wanted to spread my wings, jumped into the development side for a little while and assisted with being a DM at a number of development companies, and then thought, look, I've probably got a bit of an entrepreneurial streak and wanted to jump out and do something on my own, and that's gone well. It's not massive, but it's fun being part of a small planning business. I think the buzzword's boutique, but that just means small, doesn't it? So, but it is a small planning business, and that's where we're at.
Yeah, and I mean, for lack of a better description, the world of planning seems to have taken a real turn, probably a little bit more complicated and complex and challenging for us as we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. Maybe if you could explain to us from your perspective, about these complexities and the difficulties that, we seem to be facing at the moment.
All right, Joe, great question. Before I go there, let me just come back one step and say, well, what do planners kind of do? What's our fundamental role? Our sort of get out of bed, what do we do? And I see it, I kind of keep repeating this sentence over and over again in my head and to the people I meet. Our role is to facilitate good development. There's a couple of different aspects to those three simple words: facilitate good development. The first is facilitate, and really I think that's the role of the authorities. The authorities set policies and they determine applications. Where I'm getting at with that sentence is this really sort of drills into what needs to be the attitudinal drivers of planners. In terms of authorities, it's got to be about being facilitative. It's got to be about getting to outcomes. That's our job. If we're within authorities or if we're making policies, we're trying to make this thing happen. On the other side of the fence, as you say, when we're thinking about how we can assist, inform, guide our clients, the developers, then the key word, they've got no issue with facilitation developers. The bigger issue they've got to wrestle with is good. It's good development that we're seeking. And so it depends on what side of the fence you're on. I see my role as really in my relationships with people like yourself, Joe, is to ensure that there's quality coming through. And that when I then take that to the authorities, that I should be expecting them to facilitate that. And so there's this kind of symbiotic relationship between the authority and the developer, and it really swings around those two attitudes. One is a facilitative attitude. The other one is, I want to produce quality. That's the other attitude. So to come to your question then, yeah, the system, it's complex, it's convoluted, and I'm particularly talking about a New South Wales context, but I think it's probably true of systems throughout the nation and throughout the world. The planning system's complex. I think that we've got to be careful about, if we're looking to resolve that kind of issue, I think we've made the mistake historically of trying to fix the system with Band-Aids. And we've really got two choices here. One choice is to do something fundamentally radical and just turn the system upside down. That's a big, big deal, and we've seen people try that and gone nowhere. And I think then if we can't do that, or if that's like a too monumental task for 2020, then I think the place in which we can resolve the complexity is actually got nothing to do with little tweaks to try and save a day here, to try and fix a process over there, to catch up 5 days here. That's not the problem. The real issue is, once again, it's about attitude. And I'd love to, I know you've got the same kind of experience and frustrations that come with dealing with particularly government and with the system, is that you and I both know when we have a good day at a, let's call it a local government, and we know we have a bad day when we're dealing with a local government, and that's got nothing to do with the system. It's got to do with the attitude.
Look, I think I've spoken about a particular word called fear, right? The word fear seems to be the driving force or factor in everything that happens today. You know, have a look at COVID-19, have a look at, what's going on at the moment. It's all fear-driven, it's fear-mongering, and you need to end up being afraid of doing things, and people put you into that fear mode in order to control you. A real problem I think we have here in the planning system is everyone's afraid of change. Everyone's afraid of progress. Everyone's afraid to evolve. And what I find amazing about the planning system is the moment people get over the fear factor, or we pass the point of approval, no one goes and talks about it anymore, right? Everyone's afraid until someone makes a decision. And the moment the decision's made, no one's talking about it anymore. You might get one article come out, right? I think our challenge is to face fear and everybody to understand that you have nothing to fear but fear itself, right? So then I go back and I put a challenge out once before, and I actually got it accepted by a council. Somebody told me that they would be able to convince council to accept this challenge. And I think rather than talk about change, you need to be the change, right? So I think we go out there, we put another challenge out today for a particular council, any particular council out there that wants to evolve, right? Because that's what this is about. This is not about trying to extract extra density out of a site and, become the greedy developer and all that kind of stuff. That's not what this is about. This is about setting up an awesome future for our kids and our kids' kids, right? And simplifying their world for the future, and not have them get stuck in a coagulated system like we have at the moment that is so difficult to achieve progress on a scale that should be simple. I mean, you and I have discussed this before. Imagine having an application where you can sit down, 3 people sit down for an hour or 2, right? We'll nut it out. We're big boys. We can work it out, right? We're able to nut out anything in those couple of hours. How difficult can it be, high level, to work out setbacks, heights, all this kind of stuff? You and I, we do it all the time. Every time you and I talk about an application, we don't spend more than an hour, Comes back to they're all afraid. Everyone's afraid. You got ministers that are afraid of change because they're worried about the next election. You got council staff that are worried about change because they're afraid of their job and what council or councillors may have an issue with. They've turned around and taken the power away from councillors and given it to planning panels. But then there's another conflict of interest there in a way too, because all of a sudden we've got these planning panels out there that are, controlling the outcomes of what's going on out there. I ask the question, is that really, really, really a fair system? Again, Adam, if you're on a panel and I'm your customer, there's a conflict of interest. You can't even sit on that panel anymore. Like, where do we find it? We need a technocratic process out there, or something similar to a technocratic process. I'm talking technocratic because there's a revolution going on in Beirut at the moment, and this is where they're trying to take it. Right? They're not trying to align it with a particular industry body or a particular militia or a particular political movement. Right? They're trying to separate all that so that we're not stuck in that world. So my question to you is, how do we as an industry influence change and see progress moving forward from that?
All right, I love all that commentary. So much went through my head then. I think you're right about fear, and I think the answer to that is empowerment. I think you see in government a whole lot of issues where people are disempowered to make decisions. So there's a culture there that needs to be resolved. But your question, how do we make change? And I guess I come back to really where you're at with this podcast series, Joe. It's around the mindset. It's about thought leaders. It's about attitude. And I really think that the resolution to a whole lot of these problems comes with culture and attitude. And I've got some examples of that. And you and I know by experience that we can be dealing with a single local government area that all work in a single building with a single bunch of planners on a single floor. And yet we know that if our application goes to one team, we're in better shape than if it goes to the other team. And that's because one team has a certain culture about it and the other team has a different culture. And you and I, we don't celebrate that our DA went to our application went to the right team because the system's any different. Both teams are still working under the very same system. The system isn't the issue. It's the attitude that either prevails within a local government area or within a state government or even down to a single team. And so what needs to change is we need to have good leaders that practice good business. Good business is you get a phone call, thanks for your application, I'm your town planner. I'm about to put this on exhibition. I'll give you a call back in 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, you get a call back. They're true to their word. And they say, hey, there's some issues that have come up. I think you need to fix some stuff. Come on in and talk to me. You go in, you sort it out. Now, there's a very good chance that both applications in the good team and the bad team will take just as long to be resolved. But one experience is so much better than the other. And as an applicant, I don't think you're there counting the days so much. You just want to know that you're getting progress and certainty. And so this kind of approach to, well, let's try and save ourselves 5 days over here by tweaking the act over here, that's not where it's really at. It's like all good business comes down to relationships, and that's the culture that needs to pervade our industry, and it will fix things without even really needing any structural change.
Yeah, look, it's definitely a mindset and an attitude thing, like actually picking up the phone and talking to a planner and just say to them, hey, look, and I do this often, I do this well, I'm not trying to big note myself, but I do this well in that I'll just say to you, hey, just calling, saying hi, just want to know roughly the sort of time frame. I don't have a problem if it's 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Just tell me so I know. I don't deal with uncertainty too well, right? Generally, I get a good response with it. I'm not putting pressure on them, but I'm just trying to get them to be a little bit responsible or take a little bit of...
Yeah, it's almost ownership.
Just a little bit of ownership on a timeline that's reasonable, yeah? I don't expect it to be done in a time frame. I had a conversation the other day about an application we're dealing with, a transitional housing application at City of Sydney. Mm-hmm. And someone in particular said to me, like, are you happy with the progress, whatever? I said, I'm actually over the moon. For once... I actually seen the progress of that just happen naturally through the system, and the progress, albeit about 6 months, but you and I know that 6 months is, we're cheering, man. Getting a project of its magnitude, 140 odd rooms or whatever the case may be, and doing it in a 6 month period, man, I'm cheering with that. Like, so we're not unrealistic as an investor or a developer or as an applicant. We just want to know. And if there's that can-do attitude and the glass is half full, not half empty all the time, a solutions-based outcome to every application would just make life so much easier. And you're right, it's just a change of attitude. It's a mindset change. We're totally on the same page. But you know what's funny about all this is we go through all of this heartache, we go through all of these troubles, we beat our heads up against a brick wall, but we seem to still love what we do, right?
Yeah.
Talk to me about what you love about what you do.
Yeah, that's a great
What
question.
What keeps you excited? What keeps you engaged?
That's a great question. I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record because it still comes back to that same idea. It's relationships. I think I could be a happy butcher. Like I don't need to be just a town planner. I could be a happy butcher because I like relationships. Yeah. I like people. And I'm just really fortunate that I've been able to get to a place in my career where every day is just about relationships. And of course, it's fabulous when you see good outcomes. And so I'm not just providing minced meat over the counter, which I'd be quite happy to do because I'm still providing a relationship, but I take it to another level with planning where the relationships are positive, but you're seeing great outcomes on the ground and you drive past a great outcome and you say, yeah, that's something I was just a small part of and I'm pleased.
Yeah, look, I'm like you. I think we had a conversation this morning with some senior management, as you know, and we didn't get the exact outcome we were looking for, but it was a great conversation. They were very helpful in their approach. They were supportive with what we were trying to achieve, and it made for a better day. And that particular application's 5 years old almost, right? Anyone would have necked themselves waiting that long for it normally, right? But fortunately, we're big boys and we can handle it. And you know what? I took it with a smile. They never gave me a solution, but they gave me hope, I guess, right? That, they would work with us and they would support us in the desired outcome. And, we dealt with the frustrations together, and that's all we want, right? Because if you go there and it's just us against them type thing all the time, that's frustrating. That doesn't get you anywhere. You just get stuck in this whirlpool of negativity and, tell me all the reasons why I can't do it. Rather than if you just told me, listen, I'm not going to give it to you like this, but let's do the old, I want to call it the old Sid Cook effect. There was an old planner at Parramatta Council once called Sid Cook that my late dad introduced me to at a very young age, right, when I first started this. And I used to go in there and Sid used to sit me down with a red pen. We used to mark up a plan, mark up a setback, change an angle, delete a room, delete a door, I don't know, whatever needed to happen, marked up, stamp the thing on the spot and walk out. That is the very process we need to go back to, right? I know it's extreme. Hey, I'm with you. I know, man, this is the 2000s, we're 2020, but it's the attitude behind that. It's the can-do attitude and the willingness to help you, right? Because it's not us against them. It should be a joint effort with the same objective. It shouldn't be that. It should be I can walk in there, sit with a planner. It's not a problem. I can't even take a cup of coffee and some donuts into a place. That's a problem, right?
I think you've landed on something there. So the Sid Cook analogy now, I think, is it takes now much longer and a hell of a lot of money, but you end up still having your Sid Cook moment either in front of a design panel, a planning panel.
Oh, I haven't experienced that.
Okay.
Sorry,
in front of a planning panel or the court. And what I mean by that, while we may have had different outcomes and both good and negative experiences, you come to a point where someone makes a call. And that's what we want. And that's what we need. We need people to say, okay, I've got all the facts in front of me. I've heard from the objectors. I've heard from the applicant. I've heard from all the relevant experts in this case, and I'm making the call. I just think we don't need to wait till we've spent 12 months and $50,000 on a court appeal, and we don't need to spend 12 months in frustration with an authority to get to the planning panel. I think in a perfect world, we're sort of theorising here, you have that charrette kind of proposal where you lodge an application to council and it's notified, goes out, public comes in with their commentary, and then everyone comes into the room. 70 to 80% of applications are not so complex that you can't work it out in an afternoon with good people around the table.
Look, you're 100% right, but the problem with too many people is too many chiefs, not enough Indians. There still needs to be a chief, right? And we'll listen to everybody. So someone needs to have the courage to make the call, put their neck on the line and make a call on it, and that's it. I'd love to be that person in a room because you know what? I'd be so objective in that position and just do what's right and forget about who's right and just do what's right in the best interest of the project. That's the way to go. Adam, talk about making a call. I mean, recently we had the minister make a long-awaited call that we've been waiting for. And, I never thought I'd ever say this, but thank God for COVID-19, right? The only thing that saved us in a way from a planning perspective I talk about, I mean, I feel sorry for everybody that's been affected by it. I've got a couple of close friends that were affected and I don't wish harm on anyone. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the shift in attitude from the minister, the shift in attitude from staff, the shift in attitude from the Prime Minister, God bless his soul. He absolutely championed this to, in a way that is second to none as far as I'm concerned. He done a great job in leading us through this epidemic, if that even existed. But that's my opinion. I don't always ruin the podcast by giving you my opinion, but that's okay. You can edit that, mate. He made a call and he came up with the latest buzzword, Adam, shovel ready, right? All of a sudden, we've got this new term now that everybody's throwing around about shovel ready. Talk to me about what your opinion is about this shovel ready process and the fast tracking, and how we can try and make that, or turn that into a long-term process that we all follow. And why do we have to wait for adversity to go shovel ready and fast track? And why can't we always do shovel ready and fast track?
I'm so glad you asked me this, Joe. This goes to one of my earlier points in our conversation. So shovel ready, I think universally everyone thinks it's a fabulous thing that we've seen the fast tracking of outcomes. What has changed in that shovel ready period in relation to the Environmental Planning Assessment Act? Nothing. What's changed in relation to the regulations? Nothing. What SEPs have changed? None. What LEPs have changed? None. What DCPs have changed? None. What has changed? Attitude.
Attitude, yeah.
So the culture, unfortunately, was forced to change by virtue of this epidemic. And I remember hearing Minister Stokes in an interview with the Committee for Sydney, and I really liked what he was saying when he said, this is our patriotic duty as a industry to respond and help our nation through this process. I thought that was fabulous. He sees his role as the Minister of Planning, his patriotic response is to let's get the wheels turning and let's help fix some problems that the pandemic has led to. But let's be brutally honest about what's changed. Only attitude. And if that's the case, then this should just be what we see across our entire industry. Everybody should be, and I go back to that sentence I used before, facilitating good development. Now, that's exactly what he has initiated. He has a facilitative attitude and culture pervading our industry at the moment, and only the good stuff is getting approved. And I think that's fabulous. That's exactly where we need to be going as an industry, and that attitude and that culture needs to pervade the entire industry. And I mean both authorities who need to be facilitative and developers who need to say, well, if I'm going to be facilitated, if I'm going to catch up some time here, then I've got to actually do a good development.
Look, you know me, I'm always an advocate for good outcomes and good design. I don't take shortcuts. I'll go to the best architects if we need to. We'll go to the best consultants we need to. We're not looking for a shortcut. And I'll talk on behalf of most developers, right? No one's looking for an easy road through it, as in like a shortcut or a cheaper road. Look, there's always a couple of bad apples, right? Let's face it. But I think the majority of them want to do the right thing, will do. They contribute so much to society. They contribute so much to the employment world, so much to have a look at it. Through this epidemic, the first place they went to is the development industry to go and kickstart this economy again, right? Dude, the writing's on the wall. We are an industry at the forefront of change, at the forefront of saving this state and this nation. And there's no two ways about it, right? Without this industry, we would fall to our knees in a heartbeat. The thing with it, though, is that we keep talking about attitude, and one of the best examples I found, again, I'm not trying to plug a mate, but Liverpool Council for me, and the way their attitude was completely different to most other councils around Sydney. You've seen massive change in an LGA that was doomed at one stage. There was nothing but, junkies on the street. We facilitated some ideas and done some workshops with them and gave the mayor some ideas about putting cameras on the street. Just putting cameras on the street changed the face of that city single-handedly, right? He got a state government grant, I believe, in order to put cameras on the street. One little tweak there, plus an attitude change, created growth in an LGA unprecedented. Which other LGA, you tell me, grew as much as Liverpool grew?
Yeah, Liverpool's done a fantastic job. I guess there's a couple in Western Sydney that have done a good job, but Liverpool's certainly one of the stars.
This is what I'm saying is I reckon, again, if you and I can get out there, find a council that can change to a can-do attitude And we work with them to champion change, facilitate a change, be the change, right? They'll all follow. But somebody needs to have the courage to stand up and say, I'll have a go at that. And I reckon I've got one, right? I reckon I've got one. We'll talk about that offline.
Okay.
and I reckon you and I go in there and try and champion that, man. I reckon we could really make a difference. If one of them led by example, they will all follow. The difference was that at Liverpool, they didn't make much noise about it, right? They just shut up and they done it and they just got on with the job. And then before you know it, dude, I can't believe the densities and the sort of progress that they've made. They've got some good designs. Don't forget, the panels are the ones approving these things, right? So it's not as if they're sort of slipping through the cracks and getting through it, right? So we believe that we can affect change. You and I will try and do that. But speaking of changes, speaking of evolving, technology's had, a massive influence on us, whether we like it or not. I know it's had a massive influence on Trafalgar, on my business here. We've looked to the changes and evolution of technology and how we reposition ourselves as a solutions-based property business, and how do we evolve with time, right? We're talking about data centers, we're talking about renewable energy. We're playing in a space that we never thought we would ever get to, right? My question to you today is, how do we as an industry align planning with the ever-changing job descriptions? Because that's a real problem, right? There are some job descriptions or some industries at the moment that have no place in our planning system. So for example, there are some industries at the moment where if you wanted to put a DA in for, some high-tech industry, you can't approve it because it's not permissible in the zone. And a Macro Plan Damasi done a study once where they assessed and reviewed the ever-changing or the evolution of technology and how jobs are changing on a daily basis. But the problem we've got is our planning system isn't aligned with the evolution of technology. What do we got to do about that?
Big question. Let me think this one through. So let me first of all think about tech in terms of my day-to-day world. I think tech has dramatically improved access to information. That's got to be the greatest improvement that I've seen in my role, which is a bit more on the ground. I'm sort of dealing more at developers and local government level than at that broader national level. I guess we've been certainly benefited by access to information. Things like the planning portal that's been introduced recently has been a great step forward. Obviously, any change sees a few bugs that needs to be resolved, and that's all happening. So I think that's fabulous. My answer would probably betray my personal preference here, and that is I think we've got to be cautious about moving too far away from relationship. That's been the emphasis of my discussion this morning. Mm-hmm. And I still think ultimately you need thought leaders, you need thinkers, you need interaction with people that change culture. And so somehow we need to bleed together that tech can't replace people, but tech must be the tool that helps each and every one of us have access to information and streamlined systems, but ultimately it still comes down to people.
Look, you're 100% right. The only thing I would probably differ in that opinion, I don't have a problem with tech replacing some people or majority of people, and I'll tell you why. I have this vision that one day we'd actually have some more time like we did during the COVID-19 epidemic to actually live a little. To actually stop for a moment and appreciate the people around you, the home that you live in. Like, I built this awesome home and I never lived in it until COVID-19 epidemic, right? There was rooms in my home and facilities in my house I'd never used before. Not because I didn't want to, I just didn't have time. So the wonderful thing about technology and what everybody needs to think about, that technology replacing humans or replacing some of the jobs can't always be a bad thing if it helps you accelerate finding yourself a bit better, I guess, and living a more quality life. Everyone in our office was working from home, and everybody started to discover things about themselves and their family members and actually stop for a moment to live, right? Sort of work to live, not live to work, right? That's a really important thing here. And I'm not out there looking for unemployment rates to rise because of technology. Don't get me, that's not the way. The funny thing about that, Adam, is we adjust. The world adjusts. The universe adjusts according to different circumstances that will evolve. We've seen an epidemic. everybody just adjusted, right? Everyone worked from home. All of a sudden, efficiency rates went through the roof apparently because everyone had 1 or 2 extra hours a day to travel, right? Or not to travel and avoided the travel bit and just had all this extra time. So, look, I think it was more a question pointing towards how do we create these innovation hubs or think tanks that I think you rightly so mentioned, in order to help facilitate the evolution of planning and aligning planning with technology. And at that point, we won't have a problem because you'll get to a place. I mean, classic example was a data center deal that I believe went to council at Lane Cove, Sirius Road, right? Major data center company goes in there, lodges a DA, recommended for approval, goes to a council meeting. One of the local guys, not a planner, just a local older guy that's got a lot of time, gets up and says, "Can somebody show me where the permissible use of a data center exists in the planning controls? Show me in your LEP where it says a data center is permissible in this zone." Guess what?
Not there.
Wasn't permissible. This is a live example, man. It's only about 6 months old. It happened. So what are we going to do now as an industry to avoid the future issues that we may face in order to avoid, delays? That's a massive project, right? I think the property was 40,000 square meters of industrial zoned land, and the DC center's there, and all that's ready to go, shovel ready as they come. Can't do it.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting one there, Joe, that example, because the system exists to resolve that problem. In New South Wales, at least, there's a standard instrument, a standard LEP that applies to all local government areas. This is one of my little frustrations, is that there's an opportunity here to quickly fix that through an amendment that resolves all local government areas. We've seen that happen with childcare centres, and the government did that, and they just made the amendment that they're permissible now in a whole lot of extra zones. But I don't understand why we're still dealing with uncertainty in case law around clause 4.6. It's the same clause in every LEP. Department of Planning, just fix it. Why are we adjusting every clause 4.6 after every new decision of the Land and Environment Court? Why are we still wondering how gross floor area is measured? Because one council does it differently to the other. These are easy fixes, and the system sits there. There's an opportunity to do it. It clogs up the system. It clogs up applications. It slows down things. That's a quick and easy fix.
Yeah, look, I hear you. I think the Band-Aid approach is the problem, and we've sort of chatted about that. But while we're on the topic of frustration, talk to me about the frustration of working with developers, What are some of your frustrations? And tell me about the flip side. What do you love about it?
And I need to be careful because you're in the room, right? Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm actually, for the record, not a developer.
Okay, yeah, you're right. That's true. So I'll get back to that original catch cry of mine, facilitating good development. And that's the way you can split a developer, those who are interested in good outcomes and those who are yet to understand how important a good outcome is, that they are not emotionally or intelligently evolved enough yet to understand that it's in their best interest to do good development rather than to cut corners. So my frustrations, it's two sides of a coin. It's the same thing. My frustrations with the developer is trying to cut corners, trying to squeeze every cent out of a project to the detriment of either the future inhabitants of that project or the detriment of the public good. And the flip side to that, the great developers are the ones who, yes, do very well because they understand that good development leads to good outcomes for themselves and for the community.
Yeah, look, not trying to defend some of those guys, but, I know, being on both sides of the fence, of originally being in the design field and architecture and stuff for many, many years, one of the things that I found was the lack of championing the outcomes and incentivizing outcomes used to cocoon you into really trying to sort of push the envelope really hard. And that, you've got a developer that's paid through the nose for something. He's bought it on the proviso that he was going to get a certain density on it. And then I'm the sort of meat in the sandwich trying to work out how to keep everybody happy, right? So you want to keep him happy to give him his maximum outcome. And then but he's paid too much, right? Not my fault, not my problem, but it intrinsically becomes my issue because then I've got to try to keep him satisfied. And how do I do that? And this is where I used to try to encourage with the plan is, guys, okay, the rules in your DCP are a guide. They're not statutory law, right? I used it so many times that they used to get frustrated with us, right? And I was no planner, but at the end of the day, it's a guide. And, they are design guidelines. I mean, the front title on the front page was design guidelines. They're not design rules and regulations and statutory law that says you must comply with it, right? But somewhere in all this, it got lost in translation. Then everybody started talking precedences and, all that kind of stuff started to happen, right? And that's kind of where it gets lost.
So a good outcome is both for the developer who develops a project that attracts the people within it, whether it's an apartment, whether it's a commercial building, whether it's an industrial building, whatever it may be, it's the kind of development that attracts quality, tenancy and turnover, whether that be by virtue of a sale of an apartment or by virtue of strong leases. So that's one element to what is a good outcome. But developers can't ignore what happens beyond the boundary of their site. It must be something in which they consider the way in which they can contribute to the places around them. And so that's a measure of good development as well. Do I engage with the street? Do I activate the street? Do I turn my back on the street? Do I provide shading? Do I provide awnings? Do I provide landscaping? Do I provide a new through-site link? These are all things that contribute to an outcome, a good outcome. So it can't be just selfishly, though that must be fundamentally important. Otherwise, they're never going to be able to turn a dollar and build a project. But it must also go beyond the selfish outcome to contribute to the place in which it's located.
Yeah, so like at the moment, I'm embarking on probably one of the most ambitious projects in my life. I can't mention an address or anything like that at the moment, but
do you need a good town planner, Joe?
I know a bloke. So this particular one was exactly what you were just talking about, where I decided this is kind of a legacy project. It's going to be a legacy project, whether we make money or we don't. One of the first things I said to them all was, I'm going to do this one counterintuitive to how most developers would normally do it. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm going to go community first. My first objective here is, what does this local community want and need first? Yeah. Come up with a number of solutions that would satisfy the local community, the local council, whatever the case may be, whatever they want first. And then over and above that, reverse engineer a building and an outcome that would help facilitate that. The financial outcome doesn't mean as much anymore, right? So I think it's a part of this evolution that you go through as a person. I would believe that once you evolve and you've gotten past those financial goals and all of that other stuff that we strive for when you don't have as much growing up, and then you start to sort of cross that threshold, right? And then you start thinking, okay, what can I do for this place first? And the beauty about this too is, in this particular council, I've only ever done one other application that I'm involved in, and it's not mine in my own right. It's for another non-profit, and it's a non-profit. Let's think community first. How can we fix a couple of issues and problems on there, similar to us trying to fix the homelessness stuff, right? And then how do we integrate that into this whiz-bang building that may become the most iconic thing I've ever dealt with, right? I got to say that's probably the most rewarding project to date. It's not even past literally first base yet. But I'm so excited about that because I've taken a completely different approach to it. And for everyone that's out there, I probably have never been more satisfied with my industry more than doing the non-profit with the transitional housing, and then now this.
Yeah, so there's no doubt. There's certainly the risk takers, right? And so those that are already informed and educated and championing good outcomes, they should be encouraged and facilitated. Those that still have a way to go should be educated, and that education is not through a negative system. That education must happen through a positive process where they're educated by both their industry, their peers, and so too a positive authority that assists them. I mean, it's a bit difficult here because there's two ends of a spectrum, right? At one end of a spectrum, you go to a council and you go to a meeting and you say, I've got a great idea, I've got to break a rule over here. The council responds, oh, sorry, we're not a Clause 4.6 council. And what I mean by that, for those who aren't familiar with Clause 4.6, that's the relevant control in New South Wales that allows you to vary a standard, a rule. And so you go to some local government areas and they say, sorry, we we don't even think about change. We don't even think about there's no. They can't make that call. The law doesn't allow them to make that call. So at one end of the spectrum, you have that attitude. At the other end of the spectrum, you have a developer who walks into your office and says, I've just bought this site. I deserve 100 units out of it. And you say, and then you say, look, I think you can get 90. He says, no, I've got 100. And you say, no, you've got 0, mate. That's actually what you've got. You've just got a site with nothing on it.
50% of nothing is nothing.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. And so it's easy for me to make commentary at each end of the spectrum. Both of those attitudes need to change. The difficulty is at the midpoint, how do we make sure that the planning rules have some validity, some purpose, some intentional outcome that, the policy writers write it with good intent and with a vision in mind, and we've got to respect that, and yet at the same time find the balance to say, well, I need to break this rule in order to deliver a better outcome. That's the kind of the grey space, and really the fix is good attitude, good relationship, working relationship with both the authority and a good developer.
A topic that you mentioned before, dealing with a process as a charrette, is that right?
No, that's right. Yeah. So this is in a perfect world, Joe. This is where it'd be a nice place to get to with, I think, a whole stack of applications that currently are before local government. Let's say 70 to 80%, I would hope could be dealt with in this manner. And let's be frank, the system's been good at trying to peel away applications through complying development and exempt development. That's been good. Can we take it to a next level? And it would be ideal if we could get to a point where almost like a charrette, you brought into the room both the applicants, both the objectors, and informed, empowered professionals. And as you mentioned before, someone who can make the captain's call on the day and say, look, this modest application, let's call it a small block of flats, let's call it a new 5-storey commercial building in a town centre. We can lock ourselves in this room and resolve it. Let's not leave the room until we've either approved this, and that includes maybe writing a whole stack of conditions rather than sending you out to do a whole stack.
Yeah, so not going in and reinventing the wheel again. This is one of the problems we face when we go to these panels. I mean, you can follow the process. Let's go through it, right? So you find a site, you go to an architect, he does some sketches, he goes and has a pre-lodgement meeting, right? One of the frustrations I found was you go and have a pre-lodgement meeting with council, but the determining authority or the panel is the one that makes the decision. That pre-lodgement meeting should be with the panel, right? Mistake number one, categorically wrong step in the process, shouldn't happen. It's actually an expensive exercise. I just went through one, cost me 500 grand, right? Okay. Now, I went to pre-lodgement. I went and had a conversation. We had a scheme. The council staff flipped it on its head and said, we don't like that way. We need to deal with it this way. Lo and behold, we go to a panel after we submit the DA to council. They liked it the other way, right? So this is the problem, right? So I think there needs to be a little bit of tweaking of the process leading into the submission of the application. Tick the box, tick the box, tick the box. Let's do the hard work then, right? We've done all the hard work. We've submitted an application. That should be just a process of review and approve, right? It can be with 1,000 conditions. So what? At the end of the day, bring all the guys in, sit around the table. What do you like? What don't you like? There should be several topics to discuss. And then basically, okay, we would approve this subject to doing A, B, C, D, E, and F. That's it. Let's get up. Let's go. No?
Yeah, I agree. Yep. All those early meetings, there can't be backflips. There must be consistency. We must be able to rely upon them. It's no good getting a set of notes from a pre-DA meeting that says, here's our view, here's what we think's problematic, but we might change our mind.
Then you've got the problem of, the panels and some of the issues you would face being there and the caliber of consultants that deal with consultants and, how they deal with the dynamic of that too. And, there's personalities in there as well. And there's all that kind of stuff that makes it really difficult at times,
So I agree. I think panels are a good thing. You and I may differ on that at the end of the day, but I think they're a positive thing. They've really dealt with depoliticising applications. I think that's
But have they?
In my experience, that as soon as an application doesn't end up in front of the councillors, the answer to that question must be yes. If some councillors still have some involvement, that's really a case-by-case scenario. but I think the system is much improved by development applications going before a panel. And yes, I've won some and I've lost some, and I understand any frustration there, but I think the depoliticising of it is a positive.
Look, I don't disagree to a point, but the problem, I'm talking personal experience, is there's personalities in play again. And when people are just not getting along, they're not getting along, right? So it shouldn't be about my personality, and it shouldn't be about whether I'm a high-end architectural practice with, all the accolades, right? It should be about championing and helping that architect that is the architect for this project, for whatever reason. Empower that person, help that person, educate them. You as a panel, you as a chair of a panel, it's your obligation, it's your duty to champion and guide and educate that person to improve within themselves, yeah?
Yeah, so I think we're talking about design panels there, and I agree. You can go to a design panel 1 week at the one local government area you walk in and you say, wow, these guys are like looking at solutions, they've identified issues with the plans and they've said, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? And you walk out of there and you say, that was a facilitative, positive experience focused on getting my project to a good outcome. You walk into the same building a week later, you're in front of the same panel by name, but a different makeup on the panel on the day. And the
different
attitude,
people, different personalities again, right?
Different personalities, and the attitude is one of nitpicking, criticism, this is the end of the world, and you don't get presented with a solution on the day. And so, yes, that's ultimately a problem with individuals.
Adam, the question I have for you is, isn't it the obligation of the panel members to understand the history of the application, where it sits, where it's up to, and where to from here?
So the answer's obviously got to be yes, right? And you've given me one war story, I could see your war story and raise you 5 war stories. Like, this is where we're at. Like, of course, we've all got experiences that are both good and bad, but at the end of the day, my view is the panels are a positive introduction into at least the New South Wales planning system, both the design level and a determination level. But yeah, culture is fundamental to the outcome for each and every one of those.
Totally agreed. Okay, so Adam, the system's the system, right? And we can't change that system. But what are some of the characteristics that exist within some of those people that work well within that system?
All right, so I think the answer here is, and it goes back to some of the things we've been talking about this morning, Joe, and it also goes back to, I think, certainly my Christian heritage, and that is the way to break through this is treat people the way that you want to be treated. And what I mean by that, I've got to imagine if I was in an authoritarian position, I was a determining authority, I was sitting on a panel, I was a policy maker, whatever it is, what I would expect is that people come in before me with quality information, treat me with respect, listen to me, not ignore me, and also, importantly, hold me accountable. And so, and sometimes I think this is where some frustrations boil over, is when people aren't accountable, and we need to find a methodology to make people accountable. But really, you don't often need to get to that point if you've had a good professional working relationship with someone up until that point. And therefore, as you know, Joe, we as a practice, we're not table thumpers. That's not our MO as an organisation. Our MO is to build relationship.
Facilitate.
That's not sneaky. That's not devious. That's just human. That's just what I want in every relationship in my life. I want to be able to pick up the phone, and whether it's, a friend or a person at an authority, I just want to be able to have a conversation. They're different conversations.
A more human approach to resolving anything, and that's
right.
Possible, right?
And I think that's the outcome. And, I going back to our example, stand in front of panels, and I've been in front of bad panels as well, but ultimately I treat them with respect and dignity, and the next time I come before them, it's not like there's a whole lot of old wounds that we need to resolve. So I think that's kind of the fundamental thing for me. You've got to treat people the same way in which you expect to be treated, and you must build relationship. And sometimes that takes time in some areas, more time than in others.
Yep, don't I know that. All right, mate, I'm going to sort of wrap it up there with you today. Been an absolute pleasure having this podcast.
Likewise, Joe.
Been a great morning. I've had a great start to the morning today. Good progress with you on this conversation has been absolutely fantastic. Hope to do it again with you soon. And until I see you next, which I can't actually tell you when I'll be back, thank you so much and see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Developmental, Property and the Mind podcast. Stay tuned for our next episode, available wherever you get your podcasts. Or to talk to Joe, visit trafalgar.com.au. That's TRIFALGA.com.au.